the nightlight. Shoes on, get up in the morning, cup of milk, let's rock and roll. Kink out, kick the drum, rolling on like a rolling stone. Sing song when I'm walking home, jump up to the top of the brown. Ding dong, call me on my phone, nice tea and I'll get my ping pong. This is getting heavy, can't hear the bass, boom, I'm ready. Life is sweet as honey, yeah, this beach chain like money. Disco overload, I'm into that, I'm good to go, I'm diamond, you know I glow. Hey, so let's go. 'Cause I'm in the stars tonight, so watch me bring the fire, set the night light. Hey, shining through the city with a little funky soul. So I'ma light it up like dynamite. Whoa, bring a friend, join the crowd, whoever wanna come along. Word up, talk, just move right up the wall. Day or night, sky's the light, so we dance to the break of dawn. Ladies and gentlemen, I got the medicine, so you should keep your eyes on the ball. This is getting heavy, can you hear the bass? Boom, I'm ready. Levi's, chillin', honey, yeah, this bitch chain like money. Disco overload, I'm into that, I'm good to go, I'm down, you know I glow. And let's go! 'Cause I'm in the stars tonight, so watch me bring the fire, set the night light. Hey, shining through the city with a little funky soul. So I'ma light it up like dynamite. Whoa, life is dynamite. Life is dynamite. Shining through the city with a little funky soul. So I'ma light it up like dynamite. Whoa, light it up like dynamite. Light it up like dynamite. 'Cause I'm in stars tonight, so watch me bring the fire, set the night alight. Shining through the city with a little funky soul.
Welcome everyone to tonight's event. We're going to be getting started in just a few minutes, so enjoy the music.
Set the night alight. Shining through the city with a little funky soul. Light it up like dynamite.
I'd give the power to the people, everybody would be equal. Fight Club would have a sequel, and my rent would be much cheaper. Jenny wouldn't hate her figure when she's smaller, when she's bigger. She'd be kissing on the mirror, and the Wi-Fi would be quicker. Everybody would recycle, fewer cars and more bicycles. No more fighting for survival. You would hear this song on vinyl. If I rule the world, if I rule the world, rule the world, rule the world. If I rule the world, if I rule the world, rule the world, rule the world. You'd see a doctor if you're sick. Mary, don't you worry about it, 'cause there'd be no crazy bill. No more $1,000 pills, and age would be a source of pride. You've got beautiful laugh lines, 9 to 5 includes your nap time, and there'd be TED Talks at halftime. All the sexist, racist bandits would be sent off for rehab, and instead of feeding fear, we'd be feeding
All right, good
laughter.
evening everyone again. My name is Ashley Pierre-Louis, and I will be running the tech side of things this evening. So we want to welcome you to our Conversations Among Women Unsung Sheroes. We do have some icebreaker questions for you guys to fill out in the chat. So I will drop those in there now, or Shelly will, who's also here tonight. And we will be getting started after that.
If I ruled the world, if I ruled the world, ruled the world, if I ruled, it would be less about me, more about you, more about you. If I ruled, it would be less about me, more about you, more about you. We'd be kind to refugees, plant more trees in inner cities. We'd bus kids to see the ocean. Some kids never see the ocean. I'd make news more beneficial. I'd make every driver signal. Only love is my objective. Only love is my perspective. I'd keep music in the schools and hear every point of view. If I ruled, it would be less about me, more about you. If I rule the world, if I rule the world, rule the world, rule the world. If I
So we've got some responses coming in. Cindy said that her superpower would be a perpetual newcomer and she can break the ice with anyone. And Muriel said that she reads to read people extremely well and quickly. Nita said that she can drive a manual. And Muriel also said that public school teachers are everywhere are her heroes. Jinhee said that her superpower is the ability to find matching socks for all of her kids. Tiffany said being able to talk and talk. Oh, Nina can also drive a motorcycle. Is that right, Nina? Tiffany said help with the news. Eileen said that she's adaptable. Catherine said have the ability to love all people. And Carlene said the ability to be at different places at all the same time. I think if I had a superpower, it would probably be, maybe to just like travel to different places really quickly. Instead of having to like go to the airport to get to my destination, I'd rather just be like teleport. Yeah, I think I'd like teleportation. Nicole said patience is her superpower. And if you're just joining us, we do have some icebreaker questions. And it's, what is your superpower? Or who are some heroes in your life that you felt haven't received enough recognition in the past or the present? We'll see if any other question or any other responses come in. Nicole said teachers are her heroes. Marshall says her mom and dad are always selfless and loving to all. I'm loving all of these responses, so thank you guys. and give it another few seconds if anyone else has a response they'd like to add. Catherine says that her kids save her every day. Elwood says that Marshall is their superhero. All right, well, thank you all and welcome again. I'm going to be handing off my speaking role over to Eileen, one of our board members, and we will get started with our panel. So thank you all.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm glad to see everyone joining us on this evening. This evening with Big Sister to celebrate Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. I'm a little old-fashioned, so I tend to read off my notes and not off the computer. So this year, I feel like it's a pivotal moment, particularly for the AAPI community. Yesterday was actually Vincent Chin's birthday. He would have been 67 years old. For those of you who don't know Vincent Chin, he was the Chinese American man who was a victim of a brutal hate crime in 1982, and where he was attacked and mistaken as a Japanese American man by a group of white men who were laid off by the auto industry, because at the time, the Japanese auto industry was taking over the world, and American auto industry was going down. So he would have been 67 years old today. And also this year, it is the 150th anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad, which was built mostly by Chinese railroad workers. And recently, this was just news this morning, the House and Senate have passed a bill to establish a congressional commission on the creation of an Asian American and Pacific Islander museum in Washington. So it's a great way to commemorate that today. And also, apart from Big Sister, I am also part of the National Association of Asian American Professionals, and I'm very excited to introduce our moderator today, Cindy Yu Robinson. She's actually a colleague of mine at NAP, and we're actually celebrating our 40th anniversary this year with Limitless Leadership. So I'm very grateful that Cindy has agreed to moderate with us. I actually asked her last night to do this, and she's been wonderful in adapting to do this at the last moment. She wears many hats. I'm just going to list some of her. She's kind of an unsung hero in my opinion. So she previously worked for the Environmental Protection Agency, and she was our previous executive director of NAP, but she's currently staying on because she loves us so much, serving as our Sustainability and Partnerships chairperson, and she currently serves as the executive director of the Camden Institute in North Carolina, which focuses on bridging the digital divide. And on top of that, she also co-owns a dojo karate school with her husband and is part of the Stanford Asian Pacific American Alumni Club. So here's to introduce, oh, there's your Stanford. I'm also wearing my Asian American Girl Club jersey today, so to represent. So welcome, Cindy Yu Robinson. I'm taking the mic to you.
Thank you so much, Eileen. So Eileen is my superhero. She talks about being adaptable. Well, we all fill in where we can. I'm really, really pleased to be here. I am dialing in from North Carolina. So I think most of you are Boston or Massachusetts based. I think your organization is wonderful. Eileen has spoken so highly of the program and your events. And tonight is just an example of that. Without further ado, I'm going to talk just a little bit about how I got here, because I think leadership and sticking your neck out and being vocal and visible and vulnerable is what Asian American women particularly have to do to get a seat at the table and to bring others along. So Eileen, thank you for bringing me along. Thank you to all of our panelists tonight. And let's start this conversation. It's going to be very informal. I'm just going to do what I do best, which is break the ice and just keep it going. So we have some questions that we really want to touch on. And it relates to our identity, the challenges, opportunities, obstacles that we see, and how we overcome it and who we can bring as allies to the table. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first guest speaker, Ms. Tiffany Chan. She's a reporter with CBS WBZ Channel 4. And we're going to go Sinhee first. Let's see, Jinhee. Okay, well, all of the panelists are up. Okay, so I'm going to just basically turn it over to each of our panelists to do a self-introduction. Tell us about yourself, what you do briefly, and why you do what you do. How did you end up there? Was it just by circumstance, people opening doors for you, or you pushing down those doors? So let's turn to Tiffany first.
Hi, everybody. So again, my name is Tiffany. I work for Channel 4. Been with the station for about 5 years. This is my 5th year. I am the only Asian American on-air personality there. So super proud of that. Hoping to get more on air. Basically got through the door because of a fellow anchor, Latoya Edwards from NECN and NBC Boston, really gave me a good recommendation and got my first job in Springfield, Massachusetts, and worked my way up to Boston. So been doing it for 5 years. I'm also a part of the Asian American Journalists Association. So super excited to meet other Asian American journalists from around the country in July for that convention. But really got into this and hoping to talk to other people in the Asian American community just to get more people in the media, because I feel like that voice of living, the culture of being Asian, I think is so important when we're conveying the news. And obviously with things going around in the news, that voice is very important. So that's how I got my start.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tiffany, so much. I'm gonna have to keep tabs on you because you and I can just talk and talk forever. Next, I'd like to introduce Jinhee Song. I thought her website was amazing. So Jinhee, tell us a little bit about Tasting Counter in Somerville, how you got there, why you do what you do, and maybe something else that you do as well.
Sure. Thanks, Cindy. And thanks to everyone participating. My name is Jinhee Son Ungar. My husband and I own Tasting Counter in Somerville. It's a tasting menu format restaurant only, highly interactive and multisensory in that the dining counter is U-shaped, and in the center is our kitchen. Essentially, every course is being prepared, plated, and presented to our guests in real time. We're able to engage, talk about the food. And so over the course of 2 hours for dinner, our guests are kind of experiencing a whole range of senses being stimulated, whether it's taste, the sound, the lights, the music. There's a lot happening. Our food is considered New American, in that we are kind of taking on influences from all over the world. So we're not locked into a certain type of cuisine. I've been doing this with my husband. We opened July 2015. It's something that he was studying to do and aspired to do prior to opening the restaurant. I worked for nearly 17 years with the Department of Public Health with the Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner program. And that's how I became a mentor for Lisa Purder, who's part of Big Sisters, and still very much want to be active and a part of being a woman in a leadership position. And at our restaurant, we have about 12 staff members. Of the 12, about only 4 are Caucasian, and everyone else is of color. 4 other Asian women and some others that are on our team. And it's wonderful to be surrounded by so many strong women and women of color. And I'm really trying to give people opportunities to join our team.
Sorry about that. I lost my cursor for a moment there. Jinhee, thank you so much. I will definitely stop in. That is an amazing, amazing story. Thank you for all that you do. If on behalf of your employees and the kind of the culinary community, that's awesome. Also with your volunteerism and leadership in mentoring others. So I'm going to turn it over to Nina Liang. She is a city council member. Yay, represent. So Nina, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into, I guess it's politics or leadership?
Thank you. Yeah, and I want to start by saying thank you to Eileen and everybody over at the Big Sister Diversity Board for having us. And I want to thank my panelists as well. When I looked at the lineup of panelists, I kind of had a little bit of imposter syndrome. I was like, what am I doing here in a space with these two amazing leaders? So I'm super excited to be here with them tonight. I'm Nina Liang. I'm an at-large city councilor in the city of Quincy. And as a percentage of the population, we have now the largest percentage of AAPI community as a whole of the population. We broke 31% this past year with the census, and those are just folks who have documented and filled out the census. And so you can imagine for those who haven't filled out the census, how much higher that percentage is. And so it's remarkable to be able to represent a community like Quincy. So I was born and raised here in the city. My whole family grew up within a 10-block radius of each other. My niece is actually tuning into this call, so I want to give her a shout out. And she can attest to the fact that we're super, super close geographically. And so to be very frank, when I was going to my undergrad, I couldn't wait to hightail it out of here. So I went to New York, had this grand 30-year plan where I was going to go to law school, work for a law firm, spend maybe 30 years there, make partner, make a ton of money, and then go and save the world somehow. But I hated school, did not want to go to law school, moved back, and then Jen can relate to this. I dove right into my family's restaurant business and I loved it. All right, for 5 years, my parents didn't really understand. They kind of saw it as, you went to school and here you are, bussing tables. What are you doing? But again, and Jen can relate to this. It was so much more than that, right? It's being part of your community and it's engaging with folks who live in this area that you're building a life for yourself and you're giving them an opportunity to build a life for themselves. And so for 5 years, we had the opportunity to do that, not just in Quincy, but in Somerville, in Cambridge, and in the greater Boston area. And to give back our time and resources and volunteer was amazing. But then in Quincy, our hometown where we got our start, there were all these changes happening and we were being ignored. And I kind of felt like if we're so engaged in the community and we've done so much here for so long and we're being ignored, I can only imagine how many more folks are being ignored in the community. So I was venting a lot to a lot of folks that I knew, and somebody said, you should run for city council. And I said, I don't know what that is. And so I got lucky enough that I got to meet some amazing people in the industry. Mayor Michelle Wu was one of them. And I decided if I ran and I won, great, I can try to bring a voice into a place where decisions are being made to make sure that the decisions that, impact us, right, that we can be a part of that. And if I lost, I could still be involved in other ways. And luckily, because of folks like Michelle Wu, who is an incredible mentor, I was able to be successful, and I'm now into my 4th term.
Fantastic. So we clearly have a theme of mentorship and opening doors for one another. So I want to turn to some questions that just open-ended and see if we might start with anyone who wants to address it first. So at this time, what are your impressions about the opportunities that Asian American and Pacific Islanders have in the workforce? First in the workforce, then we can talk about community. In the workforce in the United States, do you think there's enough equality? Are we getting there? If not, what needs to be done? What are the opportunities that are presented? Tiffany's gonna take it.
Yeah. I'll go first. I think very early on, getting into the workforce, whether it was my first job, I don't know about any of the other panelists, but I've always felt like people were hiring because they wanted to meet a quota. Even when I started modeling in Boston, I was getting hired because they needed 1 or 2 Asian models. Even in news now, there seems to be a quota of who and how they want their news teams to look. And I think it's a lot of equality. We're talking about equality and getting out of the mindset of we need a quota that we have to make. There have been studies in news, in the news industry, about why Asian Americans aren't represented in the news and media industry, specifically men. And I actually did a story today at a brewery about how there is a common misconception in the Asian community on what's considered a successful career. I interviewed a guy who owns a brewery, and he was saying growing up, his parents said, you're either a doctor or an engineer. He became an engineer and thought, I just hate this. Started his own career and made that into such a successful business. And I think that's something that's also holding us back too, is getting out of what's traditionally in our minds is considered successful to our families and pursuing other opportunities as well. So hopes that resonated with some of the other panel members. But
Yeah, I actually would love to jump in on that because Tiffany, to that point, a lot of the conversations we've had on the city council and the hiring practices that we have, particularly in the schools with our first responders, right, is that we can't hire them if they're not applying, right? And that's a big part of it is how do we engage this community and educate them to sort of pass that along to their children, right? To let them know that public service is an incredible career to have, right? Whether you want to go in as a police officer, a firefighter, an EMT, a teacher, right? If you want to join the unions and the trades. I mean, one of my cousins is in one of the unions, and it took my family a little bit of time to really understand what that means, because it was like, well, is that really the job you want to do? You know, working with your hands, you know, you had an education. What are you doing working with your hands, right? And he has incredible benefits working in the union. He has a stable job, right? He's able to afford a beautiful home with his wife and his kids. And again, I feel like, Tiffany, to your point, unless you're a doctor or a lawyer, right, everything else just doesn't come across as quote unquote successful stereotypically, right? And I think one of the challenges that we have in the community is trying to figure out how we can create, you know, actual opportunities for parents, immigrant parents particularly, right, to come to these sort of career fairs where it's not just the kids coming to the career fair. It shouldn't be just on a 14-year-old, right, to go home and try to translate that over to their parents, but really engage the parents into that process as well. And have them see the incredible opportunities out there that are not just these two things.
Just to jump in, I was fortunate with my first career with the Department of Public Health. It naturally had a very diverse employees. I was part of programs that had very diverse colleagues as well. So I was fortunate in that aspect. And now my current career, I have hiring power. And so that puts a lot of the ability to make sure that I'm giving opportunities to folks who might not otherwise have that door open for them. But in a general sense, and to Nina's point, I do think that there's a lot of occupations that immigrants fall into because it's what someone that they know did, or it's something familiar. My parents owned a dry cleaners because that's what a lot of Korean immigrants get into, you know, these very kind of safe occupations. And I'd love to see opportunities open up for other career paths that immigrants can get into that don't fall into the same sort of pigeonholed occupations.
Yeah, and I would say for myself, I've jumped around quite a bit too. I started in federal government, and then I went to private sector for a little while, and then now I'm in nonprofit. I'd say that I've worked in all the sectors, even academia. I worked at Stanford for a year. I think our parents and our community's perception is really how much money are you making, whereas we really talk about the impact that we're making personally and professionally. I too am for the first time in a position of hiring people. A lot of the young people I talk to, Asian American, especially women, I will say to them, there are opportunities out there right now. This is a very rich environment for talent, meaning if you are looking for a job or you're looking to jump around, or you're thinking, do I go back to school? Do I finish my career? Or do I go where I am needed and I have some skill? Right now, there is so much money to be made because for some reason, there's just a dearth of talent. So I tell folks that they should be applying where their interests are. People go to positions and organizations based on the mission. They stay because of the people. So it's really incumbent upon the hiring managers and the directors who have hiring power to make the environment as friendly and as welcoming as possible. We recently have been doing really well as a nonprofit at Grandin, and I insisted that we help some of our part-timers and our lower income wage earners with some gas money because Ukraine and inflation. So my directors are like, can we really do that? And I said, yeah, we can do that. And then telling the board, we did that. And so we did it, and we asked for forgiveness later. And it wasn't a lot, but it really meant a lot to everyone. And so I think there are opportunities, not just for Asian American folks, but for everyone right now. You have to see yourself as a valued contributor. So what I also wanted to ask about kind of the downside. While we all see opportunities because we're very positive, open-minded, and risk takers, what are some of the roadblocks that you each have individually encountered or you see your fellow Asian American, especially women, encounter? Does anybody want to comment on that?
I
Um,
touched on this. Oh.
no, go ahead, Tiffany.
I touched on this earlier. The kind of thought of meeting a quota for companies. I know that when I first applied for my job, there was a very big push for diversity. And they were looking for different voices from different communities. And they happened to be looking for an Asian reporter, and that was me, and I applied. But when I think about it, I'm like, why do you only need one? You know, it's like, why can't every single Asian applicant be considered, you know, a good option? Why is it you only need one, or you only need two? And I think that's a very big problem, especially when you're applying and there's a lot of people applying, but they only need one person. That's a roadblock that I know a lot of my friends, when they were first applying to jobs in news and in media, that was something that they were running into. But now we're seeing a lot of companies are making the push to diversify. So I think that's really comforting. And we're seeing more and more Asian people on television. So definitely progress being made.
For me, barriers are just simply getting over people's misperceptions and assumptions. When they meet me, they automatically ask where the owner is. You know, because I'm a woman, they think I don't have ownership power. So, you know, it's an opportunity to correct, which I do. But it's that balance of, you know, how I'm presenting myself as a professional, but also how I'm also at the same time confronting all of these stereotypes and these assumptions that get presented to me to my face, that, you know, I need to negotiate with myself internally. And I also need to present, you know, a professional aura to my team. I want them to understand that you can have teaching moments to people that say things that are maybe off base or that can come off as ignorant. I am constantly trying to use them as teachable moments, not just for my staff, but my children as well. I think it's really important that we are not just reacting, you know, angrily against being pigeonholed or stereotyped, but also trying to say, you know what, maybe this is a way that I can say, hey, instead of saying this, it's maybe this is a better term. You know, Oriental is a little passé, and perhaps we, you know, one of the first things that happened was the kids' lunch schedule came out and it said Oriental salad. And I had just contacted nutritional services to say, you know what, can you just say Asian salad moving forward? And sure enough, the next month it was changed. So small little things like that. But to me, they have a big impact because I feel like I've informed someone to maybe think about words and language.
Thank you. Thanks.
I will
Nina?
say, whatever challenge there is, just sitting here and listening to Tiffany and Jinhee, it feels so good to know that, like, I'm not alone, right, and experiencing these things. So I will just say to everyone participating and tuning in, you know, whatever challenge you are facing, just know that you are not alone. For me, that makes a big difference. So thank you both for sharing. I think for me, the hard thing is that I'm fighting these sort of internal battles with myself that are then you know, justified with how people treat me, right, in that space. And so I have a lot of imposter syndrome. I grew up in a family where it's very typical sort of, you know, male dominated, right? You sort of respect your elders, and the elders happen to be identifying as men. And so, you know, then coming into a space that is predominantly male dominated as well, it's very hard to sort of break off those two things and, you know, be in a space where I am the only, you know, Chinese American elected, I'm young and I'm a woman, to, you know, older guys, and then trying to understand that they're my peers. It's a very hard thing to digest, because I'm trying to fight these internal sort of suppressions that I built upon myself, and then also trying to project outwards to get other folks to, you know, not address me in that way. And there's one phrase that somebody said to me one time. I remember I was fundraising for something, and I had called this person, and, you know, the person helping was sitting across the table from me, and said, pick up the phone, call that person, ask them for money, right? So I tried to contact this person. I got on the phone. I guess I was very timid about it, and I hung up. And my friend looked across the table and he said, you're a city councilor, right? Like, own the power of your voice. You know, you don't have to be so timid. And apologize for making a phone call. He's like, own the power of your voice and the position that you're in. And that's always stuck with me, because I think no matter what, folks will always treat you a little bit differently because, you're a woman, or you're young, or you're a woman of color. And, I think to Jinhee's point, right, you can always sort of use them as teachable moments. And I think it's hard to do that if you are still fighting the internal battles as well. So it's a little bit of both, I think, that's really difficult for us. And I think it's something that we all need to acknowledge, right, is that we have generations of sort of these stereotypes as Asian women that we're trying to break through, at the same time educating other folks, right, about our ability to be leaders in these spaces. So it's tough, I think.
Yeah, wow, that's very powerful that we own our own voices and that we teach others, we call in others or call out others. Hopefully it's not been too painful or too embarrassing, but yeah, it's very powerful to use your position of authority, influence, and your voice to speak up. I think I keep running into situations where I personally I should have spoken up. I shouldn't have been the last person to kind of reiterate what someone else said, because they were thinking the same thing, and I could have taken the assertive way and just raised it in the first place because everyone was thinking it. So speaking of that, I'm going to turn the attention back on Nina. If you were to tell your local leaders, whether they are elected leaders, appointed leaders, or community leaders, of some things to do to support the Asian American and Pacific Islander community in specific or in particular, what might that be? What would you tell them about? How would you use your voice? What would you ask them to change or enhance? So I'm gonna start with Nina. She's the Quincy City Council person.
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased. I'm going to say vote, right? And it's because, when I ran for office, I voted twice in my life. I voted for Obama, full disclosure. But there's a reason I didn't vote ever, right? My colleague on the city council, actually, at the time, when I got elected, he lived across the street from me. I had no idea what he did for a living. I'd known him for 15 years, right? No idea what he did for a living. My state rep lived down the street from me, known him for 20 years, had no idea what he did, right? And I remember when I first ran, folks were like, hey, you only have so much time to go and try to get people to vote for you. Don't talk to people who don't vote. And I was like, that makes sense. Who are those people? They'd be like, well, typically young people, typically, people of color, they don't really vote. I'm like, oh, so you want me to ignore me, basically, right? So in this space, it's this chicken or the egg question, right? Do we want elected officials and people making decisions that impact us to come to us first, or are we going to them first, right? And I think that's the problem that we have here. We have people making decisions that impact us, and we don't have a voice, and we don't have an opportunity to have a voice, because regardless of what level you're elected on, you're looking at a list of people who go out and vote to say, I need to talk to those people to get them to vote for me, right? If you're not actively voting, you're not on that list, you're not getting engaged. And I think it's this very slow crawl battle that we have, where I'm constantly trying to engage the AAPI community to say, even if you can't vote, come to a community meeting, right? And show up and make sure that your voice is heard about that development that's coming up next to your house. Or, if you're a small business owner and you have, a landlord that is pushing you out and being, tell us about it, right? There's so many things where, I try to say, translate this, translate that, get involved with the AAPI community. And so many folks are like, well, but they don't get involved. So why should I, and it's very, very hard. And so I would say, if there's one thing that I would ask of the community, it's get involved, right? Vote, or, show up to the community meetings, ask questions, pick up the phone, call your local leaders, call your federal leaders, right? Like you are all our bosses, and remind them of that, right? There's so much happening in the political space right now around conversations with, white folks and Black and brown folks. And I want to preface this by saying, let's all just put away Oppression Olympics here. I think it's also important to acknowledge that the AAPI community has faced so much in the last few years. And I feel as though we have yet to really reach that point of, being recognized for what we've suffered these last few years, right? And I want folks to encourage others to continue to be more involved. And again, know the power of your voice to speak up and, demand equitable change, right? So I'll hop off my soapbox, but yeah, definitely vote, get involved in your community.
Oh boy, that's a tough one to follow up. Jinhee or Tiffany, would you like to comment on what you would tell your local leaders to change?
I mean, piggybacking on what Nina just said, I think it's representation, making sure there's accessibility, whether it's language, whether it's making sure that local leaders represent the communities that they're participating in. We're so lucky to live in Somerville that has an incredible, diverse community. And whenever possible, in terms of leadership or business opportunities that involve our restaurant, I always ask the questions. Where's so-and-so? How come we're not reaching out to, here? Why does this room look the way it does? This certainly doesn't reflect our city. So I think it's just asking the questions, maybe being a little bit of a troublemaker. Again, just to make people think about it. It may not, create change right then and there, but somewhere in the back of someone's mind, they might be thinking, oh, I remember when Jinhee asked, how come we don't have, more representation at the table? So it's, again, just kind of being a squeaky wheel.
And I will say now that we have a new mayor in Boston and I've been covering her and interviewing her at different events, I've noticed that even a lot of her staffers are people of color, especially Asians. And I think that's really important to have people even in cabinet positions and staffers who reflect the voices of their communities. So that's very encouraging to see. Obviously, other communities are not like that, but that is something that I have noticed in the last few weeks. Obviously, in immigrant families, I know my family, they're immigrants. They grew up in restaurants. I grew up in restaurants. They open restaurants. And I've heard my entire life just to be quiet, keep your head down, work hard. And a lot of that translates to not being involved in the community. So to see more young people who are Asian, who are not only getting involved, but campaigning or even having jobs in city government, I think is super encouraging.
That is so true. So we've talked a lot about civic engagement, voters, vote, speak up, participate. How do you think Asian American issues differ from anyone else's at this time? Is there a sense of a need for special security, special protections, or really are we talking about kind of what the common good is for Boston and people of color? Because I think, I live in the South. There's a lot of concern about inflation, about jobs, about affordable housing, because we're just blowing up here. There is kind of a black and white focus here. And so Asian Americans have to kind of get a slice of the pie, really, be extra vigilant to be present. There are times when I feel like, as Tiffany mentioned earlier, that it's a quota that someone said, oh, maybe we should have an Asian American on a panel. So it's going to be either the business guru, Grace, the mental health expert, Jeannie, Cindy, the former executive director of NAP, or maybe someone like someone South Asian. But that's about it. And we're kind of an afterthought. Is it a better approach to really focus on Asian American issues, or may there be a better approach to focus on the broader agenda?
Cindy, I think it's a yes and, right? And when I say that, it's because I'm really frustrated with folks saying like, oh, Asian people are taking over Quincy and buying up all our houses. And why are the business signs not in English? I'm like, oh, you're welcome for stimulating the economy. You're welcome for increasing the, values. And I will also say it's yes and, because I also get phone calls from residents, constituents, right, who don't speak the language, but they speak Toisanese, which I speak. And they're like, hey, I have this pothole in front of my house. What are you going to do about it? Right. So it's like the issues that the API community faces is like anybody else here, right? They're frustrated that taxes are going up so much. They want to make sure that their kids, have a school bus to get to school, right? And have a hot lunch and have a Chromebook to go home during Zoom meetings. And, at the same time, they're also small business owners, and they want to make sure that they're going to go through the permitting process okay. And do they have to meet with the zoning board, right? And whether you are Irish or Chinese or whatever it may be, we as a people just go through the motions the same way, right? And then the and part of it is that we also have to recognize that we have a very large immigrant community that I believe is still not engaged enough into the process, that sometimes they just walk away from maybe wanting to open a business here or invest here, right? Because they don't feel like they're a part of this community. I want to share a story sort of from the last conversation that I think ties into this, where one of my colleagues, there was a bunch of kids riding bicycles over the past year, just going around bashing cars and whatnot. And my colleague wanted to write this bike law, right, in Quincy about like, how do you ride a bike in Quincy? Because you can't write a law that says, hey, charge these teenagers, right? So you write a law about how to ride a bicycle in Quincy, and that gives cops an opportunity to actually catch these kids and, do something legally with it, right? But the way they wrote the bike law, the first thing that came to mind was thinking about my late grandpa riding his bicycle, right? Taking us back and forth from school. And my point to this is that my colleague unintentionally was going to write a law that would have impacted how the bulk of Asian American seniors get around the city. Do you know what I mean? And so I think like anybody else, they are members of this community and just want to raise their family and have a safe place to live. But the and side of it is that we do have to do a little bit more to engage them on how they can interact with their local government should they ever have any questions or have any problems. And that's the disconnect that I think is something that I want to work on, certainly. But yeah, I think it's tough, right? Because it's a yes and. You can't treat us like we're on this little island by ourselves because we have the same problems as everyone else. And we do still also need, I think, some services that you wouldn't otherwise need to provide to other folks.
Thank you. That's so insightful.
And I'll say that, I've covered stories about inflation. I've probably covered gas price stories for the last 3 weeks. I feel like a big problem is that I will say 9 times out of 10, if I see an Asian person and I go to ask them for an interview, 9 times out of 10, they'll say no. So we don't get that perspective from Asian American families, immigrant families here, how they feel about inflation, how they feel about the rise in the price of a home, gas prices, even airports and flights being canceled, because there seems to be, for some reason, an obstacle, a barrier as to why they just don't talk to media or don't like the attention or don't like that spotlight. So I feel like that's a big problem too. It's hard to get that perspective if they don't talk to us, So I don't know if there's a solution there, but that's something that I've noticed during my career. Probably I don't think that there were many Asian families who were, willing to talk on camera.
Well, funny enough, this opportunity to be with you all was one of my goals this year, is to be more comfortable on camera and to have an opinion and to state my opinion. So Tiffany, if you're ever in this area, I'll tell you what I think. But I really appreciate Nina and Tiffany commenting on that. That is a tough question about us versus them or all of us, right? And I really appreciate Nina saying it's not just this or that, it's this and that. So let's get more personal about using our voices. What do you recommend to those who are listening to us chit chat about making changes, being leaders, breaking barriers? What are your daily life disrupting activities that help break up the stereotype of the Asian American Pacific Islander woman or being someone of Asian American descent? How are you breaking those stereotypes? And then how are you breaking the bamboo ceiling? For those of you guys who have not heard of the bamboo ceiling, I think most of us have. It's like the glass ceiling, but for Asian Americans in the professional world or corporate world. How do you break through to upper levels of supervision, decision-making, authority, and is there a bamboo ceiling? I would say that since the iconic book, Breaking the Bamboo Ceiling by Jane Hyung, who I always give credit to because she is on NAP's board and an amazing consultant. Since her book was published about 20, 25 years ago, I think there's still a bamboo ceiling. So what are your daily activities that where you disrupt and you change for yourself or for others?
Cindy, if I can just jump in, it's so timely that you're asking this question because one of the really important initiatives that we've integrated into our restaurant culture is regenerative kitchen project, where we're basically trying to get rid of the toxic kitchen culture that exists in most restaurants, where it's very patriarchal, it is leading by intimidation, it puts people in certain positions lower, sort of perception, perceived to be lower. It doesn't have a lot of female power in the kitchen. And so obviously when we opened this restaurant, our main goal was to eschew all of these traditional old kitchen type mentality and really make it be a place of empowerment and learning. And so we're currently engaged in what we're calling a disruption to the hospitality industry, if you will, which is to create a regenerative approach to our team, to our guests, so that when they come and eat, we're not just fulfilling a sense of hospitality where it's the guest is always right, and at our detriment, we always have to say yes and bend over backwards. We're saying, follow our lead. We're telling you this restaurant is the concept. We don't, offer a menu. You have to pay in advance. You purchase a ticket, which is all inclusive. So when our guests come, they can essentially leave their wallet at home because the goal is for them to be engaged in this dining experience that we're taking them on, this journey, if you will. So, for the most part, people get it and they welcome not having to think. Just, I'm going to sit. I told you my allergies. I've already selected my beverage pairing, and just everything comes at them. And we're really engaging their senses. For our staff, because it's an open kitchen, the cooks, they get to see and hear in real time people responding to the food, people responding to the whole experience. That's regenerative. That allows them to say, wow, I'm doing something that's actually having an impact. Whereas in most restaurants, the kitchen's in the back, all the accolades and all the points of compliments is given to one person instead of the entire team. And so when Peter and I, my husband, are really trying to say this can be an industry, and I'm not just talking about the restaurant industry, I'm talking about all industries. We need to change the way that we're treating workers, just taking, and not giving back. That's what we're really trying to do at the restaurant, is really instill a regenerative approach so that we can disrupt this industry, and we can say, you don't even have to have restaurant experience to work in our restaurant. You just have to be an aspirational learner. You have to be someone that wants to come in every day and make a change. As hokey as that sounds, I really believe that we're making changes. My staff can see that we are implementing frameworks and approaches to how we communicate with each other that have real impact. And we're listening, and everyone has a seat at the table, because I don't believe in, positions or roles. Sure, everyone has a role to fulfill, but really, people make their position at Tasting Counter by simply doing the work and showing us that they're motivated in a certain way. So it's sort of, they're creating their own role, and we're just following them. And so in that way, I'm really proud that we're kind of taking on this disruption of the hospitality industry, one that's been totally, burnout, stress. Everyone's yelling at each other, to one of, peace, calm. You can be restored. You can feel like this is just a job that you're learning as well, and opening doors for people who maybe wouldn't think to work in a restaurant, but here's an opportunity where you can work in a restaurant, be involved in this really cool concept of dining, and get something out of it, truly, not just a paycheck.
Wow, Jinhee, I applaud you. I am enthralled by your vision, your way to execute that and communicate it. That's just beautiful. Like I said earlier, I went to your website, and I know that you are implementing something that I hope that other people can appreciate and replicate. That's just amazing. I know that my parents have owned 4 different restaurants. I know it's very hectic. I did not know it was so toxic. But it sounds like your restaurant and your vision is a completely new one. So thank you for doing that. It's like in the chat, everybody wants to come. It's a big sister takeover. But so turning over to Nina or Tiffany, talk about the way that you disrupt. How do you make changes? How do you break the bamboo ceiling?
I'll say I've been a taste encounter. I loved it. It's very interactive and it's small, but I think it's small on purpose. You can see exactly what's happening in the kitchen. Worth the experience. Very, very fun and very thoughtful wine pairings too. I do remember that. But on the news side from my job, there's a stereotype that Asian women are shy, soft-spoken, reserved. And I know that I look to Janet Wu, who worked for Channel 5 for many, many years. She was the reporter for Channel 5. And I've never told her this, and I probably would never in person because I'd be so intimidated. But I saw that, like Nina said, in politics, because that was my first job. I was a political reporter. In a male-dominated industry, being a woman, being a minority, you can't be afraid to ask a question, to be aggressive, sometimes ruffle some feathers. And I really saw how Janet Wu was fearless, really broke a lot of stereotypes as to how people view Asian women. And I think that's probably why her career lasted so long and continues today on Channel 5. But basically just don't be afraid, especially when you're surrounded by male peers. It took me a while to get over that hump. But I remember when I got comfortable and learning after watching Janet Wu, I remember the governor now, sometimes he'll just look to me when we're in like a big circle and all the reporters want to ask him questions. He automatically looks to me sometimes because he knows I'm going to be the first to jump in. And I think it's getting over just a little bit of that fear, that stereotype and how people might view you, I think is really important.
If I can,
I will just
to that point, sorry, Nia. I was just going to say, in addition, Tiffany, to not being afraid to ask the questions, it's also important to pay attention to those who aren't. And if they're speaking and someone interrupts them, I'm always cognizant of that and making sure I circle back to give that person an opportunity, because I think it's equally important to listen to those who aren't speaking, because they often have very important things to say.
So well put. So well put.
I was going to say, show up, right? Show up in any way that you want to, right? Be authentic to yourself, but show up at the very least. I remember it was really difficult trying to, politics is like, you're building the bike and trying to ride it at the same time, right? And it was really challenging over the last few years trying to navigate what issues I wanted to take up and what issues I shouldn't take up. And again, sort of to Tiffany's point, right? This sort of notion of like, well, we're timid, let's sit back and listen, and listening is important as well, but speaking up, to Tiffany's point, is also just as important. Anyways, there was this sort of, back and forth of people trying to figure out, what the vote was on something, and I wanted this and somebody wanted that. And there was this deal that seemed to be happening behind closed doors, right? The whole, the backroom deals that happen, right? And I remember my friend who's in this industry for a long time turned around and said to me, like, you know what? If there's a backroom deal happening, be in the room, right? Make sure you're in that room where it's happening. And I was so struck by that, right? Because I came into it trying to like do the flip the table approach, right? Which doesn't always get you there, right? You have to sort of learn what you're walking into so that you can make those changes, right? Like Jinhee is making these incredible, I'm so in awe of you because I see this young woman who owns this restaurant and it's so different and it's like such a shake up to the industry and I'm just in awe of that. But I can guarantee she didn't walk into it blind to how the restaurant industry has been, right? And so it's the same thing with politics and even in the news and in any industry, right? That understanding how we got to where we are will give you the tools to make the changes you want to make, right? It's not going to happen overnight. Change is slow, it's painful, but start by being in that room, right? Start by being there and listening and learning, right? And figuring out what you're working with so that you can make those changes that you want to make. And it's not easy. This goes back to, again, know the power of your voice, right? Whether it's not speaking up and asking those questions, but you're still present, right? You're still in that room. That means something. You showed up. If it's speaking up and asking questions and making your actual voice heard, that makes a difference. And I think showing up is such a challenge sometimes. So at a very base level, I would just say to folks, a way to make change, a way to disrupt, start by just showing up, be in those spaces, right? Be interested. It's important to make yourself be seen and be heard.
Yeah, I think for me, I would agree with Nina and all of our panelists that showing up and giving your perspective is one few persons who is less engaged, one more person who is assertive. Being in a position to demonstrate decision-making power, demonstrate vision or care for people, that's the way that I disrupt anyone's stereotypes, that I will be outspoken, that I will take charge, and that I will think about others and put others before myself. There are times when I play, I would say, mediator, and I don't have to be the loudest person in the room, but I do have to be the best listener. And sometimes I'm not the smartest person in the room. I always acknowledge that there are people who are subject matter experts that I turn to. So that's the beauty, and that I think some of that is style. So that is my style, but I'm always trying to help people take risks where they might not have otherwise, because I support them. So let's I don't know about you all, but I'm starting to feel my age. I have decided I'm going to go gray or silver completely. I'm not going to color my hair anymore. I work with people who, some of them are half my age, some of them I could be their moms. So as I'm getting older, I find that I have this accumulated confidence because I've lived life, and I've taken risks that were worth taking because they landed me in positions of being able to host. Last Friday, I hosted the Secretary of Commerce in our space, got to give a tour of the Crandon space to the governor of North Carolina and talk a little bit about how we do things around here. So turning to this question that I think we could all write books on, what are some things you would tell your younger self? Maybe your freshman in college self, maybe your high school self. What are some things you would tell your younger self to do and not to do? I will start with Tiffany because, yeah, let's go. Let's start with Tiffany.
My younger self. Well, I will say that I got into news because Chinese was my first language. So growing up and starting to go to preschool and learning English, I learned a lot of it by watching the news, by matching the words to the pictures on the screen. And that really helped me. But subconsciously, as like a 5-year-old, I didn't understand, because I'm from Florida. It's a lot of white people, not a lot of Asian people who look like me. And I never saw anybody on the news while I was younger who was Asian. So subconsciously, I thought maybe this is just something that Asian people don't do. Like, I just didn't understand it. So it wasn't until my junior year of high school that I realized, oh, this is something that I can go into. This does fit my personality. So I would say maybe embracing some of those things a little sooner and getting into some of these passions a little sooner. I think growing up in Florida and having not many people look like me, I just kind of went with the flow and just didn't think anything of it. But I would say kind of recognizing those things a little sooner and getting into things like getting into media and news and maybe radio a little quicker would be something that I would tell my younger self.
Hey, you would have started earlier. Interesting. All right, Jinhee, tell us what you would tell your younger self.
I guess I had the privilege of talking to my younger self through my today 8-year-old daughter's self, because she kind of represents a lot of how I see myself when I was her age, but she has so much more confidence. And so I'm trying to instill in her this sense of wanting to be confident, using her voice, protecting herself in situations where maybe louder voices are speaking above her. So I feel really honored to have this opportunity to kind of talk to my younger self through her, trying to have her avoid, I already see it when her older brothers kind of try to shoot her down while she's talking. I'm always like, no, June was talking, like, let her speak. Because I think when I was younger, I thought maybe there wasn't something that I can contribute to, only because my external world didn't reflect what I saw when I looked in the mirror. I thought maybe I needed to just always be an audience member rather than a participant, kind of watching what's happening in the world rather than being very engaged in it. And I'm completely changing that with my own kids. I'm making them be engaged because I feel like that's the only way that they're going to understand how they can have an impact in their world and their future. So I'm kind of talking to my younger self all the time through my daughter.
That's great. Yeah, I have a daughter. She's a little older than that. How about Nina?
I would say sort of two things I combined is like worse things have happened, and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? And I say this because I feel like, you know, we have all these expectations put onto us about what we should be doing with our lives. I'm talking specifically, you know, in the immigrant culture, and then more specifically than that, like the AAPI culture, where like things have to be so perfect, right? You have to have your life planned in such a way to make X amount of dollars to be successful. And I feel like, for me anyways, right, growing up with that kind of a sort of thought process has almost kind of like frozen me to make decisions, because I never want to fail, right? I don't want to fail with every decision that I'm making. Is it the right one? Is it the wrong one? And then you're frozen, right? And you're letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. But guess what? Worse things are going to keep happening. Worse things have happened. Worse things will happen. And this thing that's in front of you that may feel like, my God, how am I going to get through this challenge, right? And oh, this is so hard, it's brutal, or I messed up so badly, or I don't have the skills to handle this, or it's way too big of a thing to take on, and you feel so overwhelmed, especially in the last 2 years, right? Every task, frankly, to be honest with you, not having to, you know, put on dress pants right now is amazing, right? Thought of putting on dress pants and going in person to this event, that was overwhelming. But, you know, in all honesty, it's, in all seriousness, we do, I feel like we have this culture of having every decision needing to mean something and be perfect. And it's like, well, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. This bad thing happened. You messed up, or it didn't go your way. It's okay. Worse things have happened. Worse things will happen. And you have to just keep moving on, right? You learn from those experiences. That one of my best friends in the whole world is tuning in tonight. And that's one of the things that she has said to me. And it's so true. Is you learn from those experiences, right? You learn from those failures. And I know it's easier said than done. Trust me, folks. Like, I'm, you know, pot kettle, right? Like it's much easier to preach this and to practice it. But truly embrace. I didn't go to law school. So what? It's okay, right? Like it's all right. And there's so many things in front of us that in that time and in that moment may feel like the worst thing in the world. It won't be. It's not, right? Just pick up and move on and keep forging ahead. Keep making those mistakes, right? And keep gaining the experience that you'll get from those mistakes, and just keep going on. Be kind to yourself. That's what I would tell myself. I spent a lot of years trying to learn that, and I'm still working on it. So I would tell my younger self that, and I will tell my tomorrow self that.
Yeah. So do you ever hear the things that your mom had said to you? My mom said to me as she got older, always take care of yourself first. Use the fine china. Buy the, you know, purse that you want. Take care of yourself. And I think today's, you know, American is so cognizant of the need for self-care and mental health. It's not a bad term anymore. It's, you know, it never was. Just, I think people confuse mental health with mental illness. It's not that at all. Everyone needs mental health. And she always said, put yourself first. No one can take care of you better than yourself. So I think about that. And that's something I would tell my daughter and tell my younger self is don't do the all-nighters. Don't put yourself out so much for other people. Learn to say no and learn to say yes to opportunities for yourself. I've never had problems with saying this and something else, multiple, as Eileen pointed out in my bio, multiple jobs, multiple responsibilities, because it was all an adventure and it was fun. So I think I would tell myself, younger self, to be more vocal and more visible. And it comes with some vulnerabilities, my 3 V's, right? Vocal, visible, and vulnerable. I also have something on my Facebook, and sometimes I look at it and go, oh, I know. It was when I was doing a lot of yoga. I said, open your mouth. Open your mouth, breathe, fog up the mat, and say something amazing. So, all right. So let's get to a speed round. And we can open up for questions, but a quick speed round. Who inspires you? Who are your role models or mentors? Speed round. It has to be like really quick. We'll start. Whoever wants to go first.
You know, I said earlier, Janet Wu. from Channel 5. And I think just seeing her just disrupt the stereotype, especially in media. I don't want to age her, but decades, her career has been so long spanning that I think it just speaks volumes. So she's definitely my role model. Never said that to her in person, but it's inspiring watching her in action. So that's pretty cool.
We're going to send her a recording of tonight. Shout out to Janet. All right.
For me, it's got to be Michelle Wu, hands down. When I first ran again, I knew nothing was going on. Somebody was like, "Oh, you should meet her. Young Asian woman, go be friends." And luckily enough, she took me under her wing, and I'll never forget that. She called me once, like randomly at 10 o'clock at night, and I thought I was in trouble. And she's like, "How are you? Are you okay? Are you staying hydrated?" And that is somebody who truly mentors other people, right? The rising tide lifts all ships. She is like the epitome of that, and she's always her authentic self. She's so impressive, and to just see somebody who is doing the work she's doing is absolutely amazing.
Very, very cool.
Mine is my aunt, whom my daughter has her middle name. She was one of the first Korean women to be accepted into Berkeley. She became an artist, married very briefly, but decided it wasn't for her, and lived her life as an independent woman. And I was very close with her growing up until she died of Parkinson's. But up until her death, I always admired just her style, her independence. She seemed to be kind of bucking the stereotypes of a, subdued, demure Korean woman. And it's something about her personality really resonated with me.
Thank you for sharing. Wow. I actually don't even know, but I have lots of mentors, and I always advocate that you have a board of advisors. There's someone in my life for IT, for mental health, for physical fitness, for style. I often just like, I'm a brainiac. I'm a nerd. I'm a geek, but I want to appear good. I want to age gracefully as well. So to that end, I think the people who have always been inspired me were really outspoken activists, more than I could put out. Someone like Helen Zia, someone like, oh gosh, I'll just leave it at Helen Zia. All right, so now I'd love to open it up to questions if everybody's still around. So if we can turn it over to, I think Ashley or Lisa is going to help us with questions. Were there some that popped up in the chat that we could direct to any of our panelists this evening?
We don't have any yet, but we'll see if anyone has a few. Oh, first one is, how would you define a shiro?
So Shelley Gatlin asked, how would you define a shiro?
I would say definitely, to my earlier point about Misha, somebody who is going to bring up others with them, right? People have very short memories. We're all going to be gone one day, right? Hopefully the impact of our work will not be. So it's so important to bring others along with you every step of the way, right? When you're figuring things out, when you're succeeding, when you're failing, it's, I think in any venture you do in life, you can't go at it alone, right? Even if you have one other person there with you, Cindy, to your point of having that sort of group of people to ground you, right? It's, I think, so important to be open to bringing others along with you, to showing them things that you learned along the way, maybe learned the hard way, so they don't have to learn it the hard way, right? Like let's not reinvent the wheel on things that work well, but you shouldn't hoard power and you shouldn't hoard leadership like that, right? You really should make sure that you're sharing that out, because again, you're going to be gone one day, so let's make sure we're doing everything we can to uplift others along the way.
Anyone else?
Yeah, we had a few more come in. And also, if you'd like to say your question out loud, we can unmute you for those who are in attendance. Eileen asked.
Could I recommend this? It's a small group. Can we just open everybody's camera? Everybody just like get on screen. We'll do a screenshot at the end. Have a conversation with us.
I don't know if that happens in webinar mode.
Oh, bummer. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But Eileen asked, what do you think of Asian representation today in TV and movies and media overall?
I think that's a directed question.
I feel like that's
Tiffany.
I definitely think it's getting better. We've seen movies like Crazy Rich Asians finding success basically in all Asian cast, although I do think that plays to a little bit of a stereotype sometimes. But I think in news, definitely seeing more. I know AAJA, Asian American Journalists Association, is making a push to encourage more Asian Americans, especially men, to get into media, because the voice of minorities is so important, especially when you're out in the community and conveying stories and conveying what's happening. I definitely think it's getting better. But of course, like every industry since the pandemic, the news industry is changing. It's going digital. People are consuming news and media in so many different ways. But representation wise, I think it's getting better. You know, we're seeing more actresses, Asian American actresses. We're seeing Netflix shows like Bling Empire. And I think I was watching an interview that they had with some of the executive producers, and they were saying a lot of the reason why they wanted to make a series like that is to disrupt the stereotype. So definitely think it's getting better, but a lot more work to do.
And we also have a question from Carleen, and she asked, what is some of the best advice you've received in your career?
I think for me, it was to always have a voice in the room, whether it's through writing or contributing something through writing or through speaking, but to have a presence, to have some sort of a participation in whatever meeting or work-related issue is happening. It shows that you're involved, it shows that you're paying attention, and it shows that you can be relied upon. And so I've learned, you know, when I started, I was very young, fresh out of college with the state, but I paid attention and I made sure that I wasn't just there doodling or whatever. I made sure that, you know, first listen, take the information, apply it when you can, and then also using that confidence that I was building upon, use my voice to then start new conversations. And I'm doing that at the restaurant. I am engaging new conversations, asking the questions. One of the questions in the chat I saw was, you know, correcting stereotypes. The way I handle that, I ask questions. Someone comes in and says, oh, is this a sushi restaurant? I say, why you ask that? They're like, you know, what are they going to say? So I want to ask the questions. I want to disrupt their thinking so that they don't ask stupid questions again, so that they can maybe think a little bit more about how they make assumptions and then open their mouth. Maybe they can think first before the assumptions come out. It would save us all a lot of anguish and rage, I think, if people did that more.
I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the best advice for careers that I've heard and I've experienced. So this is going to be like rapid fire. This is my opinion. All right. One, women should apply for positions they feel that they're 50% qualified. There is no perfect candidate for every job description, right? So the job descriptions, you know, as a successful candidate can do all of these things. Well, if you as a woman feel that you can do at least 50% of it, apply. Do not say, oh, I need to do 100%. No, just apply. Show them your potential, show them your interest, show them your spirit. Secondly, always negotiate a salary. If you're offered something within a range, do know that the hiring manager has more money to give you. And if you don't assert yourself and you don't negotiate, you're not exactly the candidate that they want. They want to see assertive people because they know that you can fight on behalf of the company or the mission. So that's another thing. Definitely negotiate. Definitely find a mentor, find a coach, find an advisor. They're all different. They're all different. Some people can't be within your line of supervision. So, but do find someone you can talk to. Another thing is continuously learn on the job, LinkedIn Learning or Coursera or whatever you're doing. Just always be bettering yourself. And then finally, I think, know that your work is important enough that it's not that you have to be essential and irreplaceable, but the value of a team is that your contributions make someone else's job and someone else's overall mission doable. So that's the important part about your legacy, is that you do what you say you do, and that you are contributing to a bigger product or bigger service. So take that note, revel in your career, and if it's a toxic environment, either change it or get out. That's it. That's my career advice. So learn through the hard knocks. Other questions?
Yeah, also seeing a lot of yeses in the chat, so other people definitely agree with the things that you guys have been saying. We have an anonymous question, and it said, what are the key success factors for those who are achieving success in each of your individual fields? So a question for everyone.
Can you repeat the question one more time, please?
Yeah, what are the key success factors for achieving in each of your fields?
I think for mine, everything's so divisive, right? Everything is so divisive. And, you know, Ashley, if you were sort of in this window with us, right, there's 5 of us, and, you know, you need a majority to pass something, right? So if I don't have 3 people voting on something, or 2 people and me voting on something, it's not going to pass, right? So it's something that I have found that has worked well is, you know, don't assume, right? You don't want folks to make assumptions about you and where you stand on things and who you are and what you believe in. Don't make assumptions about other people also, right? Have a conversation with them, try to collaborate with them, try to work with them and figure out how you can get everyone to the table to have a conversation to move everything forward together. You know, something somebody told me once was, you know what, Nina, you're not going to please 100% of the people 100% of the time. It just is what it is, right? That's just how it works. And, you know, at the same time, if I alienate everybody, right? Ashley, Jinhee, Tiffany, Cindy, if I alienate all of you and I try to get something voted on and none of you support it, I'm not effective. I'm not doing my job, right? I can't make the change that I want to see happen. And so even if all 4 of you are like, we want to paint the houses green, and I'm like, I want to paint them blue, right? If we can't come to some sort of agreement on it, all right, but let's at least sit down and have a conversation, right? Let's have that dialogue and figure out how we can come to a point where we can all move forward together. I think that's so important in today's day and age where, again, everything is so divisive and it's so draining, I think, mentally on us because of that, right? And there's so many people who make judgments about you and then judgments that go out to other folks. And it's, I think, really important to just talk to people, right? Just have conversations with them, even if you disagree with them. Have a conversation with them, right? Talk to them, ask them questions. Jinhee's point, ask them, why did you think that way? Why do you think that way? Right? It's so important to just talk to people. Everyone's human, right? And I found that to be something that helps me to get through some of these really challenging times politically that we're in right now.
And to piggyback off of that, the importance of when we're having conversations to also listen, because especially for the news, I would say 60–70% of what I do is listening and absorbing information. And to even pick a couple of personal things that you hear and remember that about somebody, because you never know when you're going to see them again down the road. I learned about that so much through politics. I basically lived and breathed the state house for 3 years, and meeting people over those years and remembering little things. Oh, you have triplets, you do this, you do that. And bringing that back around if I need that person 2–3 years later. That personal connection, remembering those things means so much to people now, especially in the world of Zooms and not seeing people in person as much. And I feel like that has helped me so much when I need someone in a pinch and I remember them and I remember a little tidbit of information and be like, hey, how's it going? How are your kids? How's voting in Yarmouth? You know? So I think that's really important. Listening, remembering, and keeping in contact with those contacts that you may need in the future.
For me at the restaurant and with our team, we try to engage in lateral communication where it's not top down, where I try to lead with authenticity and integrity. And if there are issues that come up with something I may have said that can't continue as such, I try to be transparent so that there can be some shared understanding of why decisions were made in the way they were made. I think my team knows that there is an open door policy for bringing issues or concerns to the table. And it's not like everyone complains all the time. Just knowing that there is an outlet for their concerns has made things incredibly accommodating for our team to just know that they're heard. And to your point, Tiffany, about knowing these little tidbits, I know so much about our team because we engage in these conversations daily over family meal, because food is life, and life comes out during a meal. When you're sitting around sharing a meal together, that's when you really get to know people. And so for me, I need to see my team, and then I can hear them, and they can hear me better too, because I've seen them. They don't just work for me, that we work together. And so that's really important for me and my team. And I think they've responded really well to that. They often say, if they've had other restaurant jobs, no one's ever treated me like this. No one ever listens to me. That's a shame. That's not how we should be treating not just our employees, but each other. I mean, it's just a general rule. If you listen, you hear so much about someone. They are more apt to reveal themselves to you. And in that way, you get to really see a person. And I think that's really important.
Wow, Jinhee, I find all of everyone's stories so fascinating, especially your vision. I think for me, knowing my circle of control versus my circle of concerns, I'm concerned and interested in a lot of things, but I have to know what I'm best at and where I can make value adds and I can make an incremental difference. Being bothered by people's misuse of language or stereotyping me doesn't really affect me, because I can only control what I say. And to refer to other people as my team or my associates, and then treat them in the way that I would expect to be treated, that's the thing I can control. So I focus on that. In terms of helping educate others, I think one of the questions about I see in the chat is, what would you tell AAPI men who are fighting alongside with you every day to disrupt the system? I've been really giving some thought to allyship. What can people who are not exactly like us do with and for us? And I think it's to, as Nina and Tiffany pointed out, really have meaningful conversations and listen to their perspectives. I think together those perspectives change over time, not overnight, over time. So I give a lot of grace and a lot of understanding to people who just maybe never had really met an Asian person as opposed to an Oriental. Or they don't mean, most people don't mean harm. They just don't know. So I'm the subject matter expert. I better tell them, and I personally have been an Asian American in the United States for about 35 years, but my younger years I was spent as an American looking the way I do overseas in Singapore and Thailand. And we are not Asians, we are Asian American. There's definitely an American perspective and experience. And so to be mistaken as a foreigner, that bothers me. But I do try to, where I can control it, explain. I was born here. I'm an ABC, American born Chinese, proud of it. I'm second generation. My parents, yes, we did work in the restaurant business. Yes, I do know martial arts. Yes, I do enjoy yoga. Yes, I'm in an interracial marriage, but there's still so many other aspects of this iceberg of diversity that you haven't even opened up yet. So let's not stereotype. That's where I come from on that. But yes. So Ashley, were there any other questions that we can address, or does any? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there were just a few more. I know we're getting close to time. Where did it just go? And you were just talking about stereotypes too, so this rolls in correctly. Greatly. Have you ever felt tired of correcting stereotypes? And what is the most effective way you found to handle that feeling?
I think some of the folks have already addressed that, but I'd love to hear a direct question to that question, a direct answer to that question.
I would jump in here and just say that it's okay to also be tired and just walk away. Like, I just want to acknowledge that, right? Like, none of you should feel like you have to be the champion for an entire community. It's literally my job, right? Kind of like what I'm asking to do. Like, I'm actually asking to be a representative for an entire community, but it's okay to be tired. It's okay to be tired and want to just walk away from that, because, oh my gosh, right? Like, somebody said it to me once, where like, your cup can only take so much, right? And typically you're sort of operating like, here, you've got a bunch of stuff going on, so you can like throw a lot of stuff on top of that cup before it spills over. And I want to acknowledge that I feel as though the last few years we've all been operating with our cups pretty full already, right? So you throw anything on top of that, it's going to spill over, whether it's personal stuff going on or financial stuff going on or professional things going on or just world stuff going on. It's okay to be exhausted and just walk away from that conversation and not feel like you have to correct them. I think if and when you are ready to, and you face those conversations in a moment where you do feel prepared to sort of have that educating conversation with somebody, great, right? Do it. But also recognize that, to your point earlier, Cindy, too, talking about self-care, you come first, okay? Like, please, like, you guys, somebody just dropped into the chat, walk away, they don't deserve your oxygen. Yeah, right? The whole airplane thing, put the mask on yourself before you put it on anybody else. Take care of yourself first. Be kind to yourself. You do not, just because you are in leadership roles, like with Jinhee and Tiffany and the spaces they're in, oh my gosh, I'm sure more often than not, they're like these token people that have to answer for an entire community. And it's like, I don't know how they do it, but I'm sure, there are moments where they just want to walk away from it and probably don't, because they're amazing, right? But anyways, it's take care of yourself, please, first and foremost. That would be my response is, yeah, just walk away,
And I will say the silver lining to feeling tired and frustrated is actually, it took me a while to kind of realize this. It wasn't until 2 years ago when we were covering a lot of the protests over racial inequality and everything like that was going on in Boston. It was like a summer of it. And that feeling of, not looking like everybody else, feeling like you don't belong, that culture clash of how you grow up and being in America. Yeah, the struggles of our Black and Brown communities are so different from the Asian American communities and even for immigrants. But I would say the underlying feeling of feeling like you don't belong, these communities can relate. And I didn't realize the power of that struggle, of frustration, of feeling angry and tired, resonated when I covered some of these protests and talked to people marching, why they march, why they felt it was important to come out and voice their concerns. Yeah, our battles are a lot different, but I think the common feeling of, we're not being perceived the way that we actually are. Our feelings aren't really being conveyed. And I think that's the silver lining that I've realized, that through growing up looking differently, eating different foods, speaking a different language, that it's actually really helped me in my storytelling and how I talk to people and relate with people, especially in the immigrant community.
I think I mentioned how I handle stereotypes, and because I'm front and center often at the restaurant, masks are really helpful in covering little snark remarks that I can say back to people when they're like, how come you're not using chopsticks? Humor is definitely a way to cope with stereotypes, maybe sassing it back at them. I'm teaching my kids a lot about that. During the pandemic, they were the targets of a lot of, anti-Asian sentiment because they were being blamed for the coronavirus. So using humor to deflect the pain, I think, is really helpful too, because it's going to happen. We're just going to look like this for the rest of our lives. We're going to hear, you speak English really well. How long have you been here? These assumptions that, I can't say they meant it or they intentionally meant to rattle me. I can just say, hey, yeah, either it's a teaching moment or I love this option to walk away. I never really exercised that before in a hospitality industry. Sometimes that can be difficult, but making sure you're taking care of yourself. If it's a situation where it comes up outside of a business or a professional setting, I might just employ that walking away strategy, because sometimes it's much nicer to just take the high road and not engage in that kind of energy.
And I'd say I have one last question before handing things back to Eileen. Do you guys realize in your daily lives that you are also sheroes?
I left my cape in the other car, but yes, sure we are.
Sorry, go ahead.
This is a delay on my side.
I am not cognizant of it all the time, but I think by showing up every day at the restaurant and conducting myself in the way that I do, whether it's being listening to someone's concerns or making sure people have voices at the table during certain meetings, I feel like I'm conducting myself in a way in which my parents have shown me to always be, which is to be generous, to be kind, respectful, and to be helpful whenever possible. So I don't think I'm always cognizant of when it's happening, but I think the results are always there because my team is, there's a lot of cohesion and there's a lot of healthy communication happening. It's not always the case, but I do see the impact of how my leadership, my involvement in my team's lives, at least at the restaurant, is having some kind of impact. And I guess in that way, that's a shero.
I was going to say earlier that I think the imposter syndrome thing still happens a lot, right? And so it's strange always, and it always makes me like, uncomfortable whenever I hear that. But I will say to Jinhee's point, I think that's what sort of motivates you to keep going, right? Are there sort of little everyday victories that add up over time, right? And you help somebody who, like I mentioned earlier that, I got a phone call from somebody who doesn't speak the language and needed a pothole fixed. And it might seem like such a small thing, but to that person, right, they were able to engage with somebody to get something fixed that was a really big deal for them, right? They didn't want to pop their tire every time they pulled out of their driveway, and they reached out to their local government and they saw results, right? And I would hope that the impact of that is long lasting. And it's all those little things that I try to remember whenever there are hard things thrown at me, right? Again, I'm in an industry where there's a lot of negativity going around, and very rarely do you ever hear from folks who say thank you, and you're not in it for the thank yous, right? But it is certainly a thankless industry. So when you hear like the little things that you feel you're doing your job, but it's made such a big impact on the other end of it, it's kind of like, oh, okay, like that's great, right? Like I did something and I helped somebody, and that's awesome. And I'm just going to keep on doing that. And so, yeah, again, I think Jinhee summarized it perfectly. It's all those small steps that you take every single day intentionally that make that long lasting impact. And that's what you hold on to when you have those tough days.
And I would say even some of the little moments that maybe would make us feel like sheroes, we sometimes may even overlook. Full circle moment from the NAP scholarship event a few years ago where I met you, Eileen. I had this mom, I think it was actually two moms, come up to me, and she was like, my kids love watching Channel 4 because they don't see anybody that looks like them on TV, on the news. So they were like, they think it's so cool, it shows them someone who looks like them can be on TV and do what you do. And at that time I didn't realize it, but that's a full circle moment for me when I was growing up and not seeing anybody like me. And unknowingly, I then became that for some kid in Boston. I think that's awesome. And I didn't even realize that was happening. So it's nice to hear things like this happen, to validate that what we do and our presence and our leadership and our mentorship is actually going somewhere.
Okay, well, thank you, panelists. Oh my gosh, I could listen to you four for hours. It was amazing. And what a great way to celebrate AAPI Heritage Month. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your clearly busy lives to spend time with us and influence our our audience, and I definitely learned a lot of tidbits from you all, and being, having a voice and negotiating and not accepting things for at face value. And so I know some folks would definitely want to follow you and stalk you in some way. So in a very like fangirling way, not like, creeper, but so please, if you can, enter your social media followings, your Facebooks, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok if you have one, so where folks can follow you, and as well, I know Tiffany, share with us your where we can see you, report the news, and Jinhee, your restaurant website, and Cindy, where we can find share us your company's workspace where we can see your amazing work. Again, and this event has been hosted by the Diversity Board at Big Sister Association of Greater Boston. Our main focus and mission is to increase and retain more women of color as mentors and advocates and donors. And particularly in Boston, a majority of our little sisters are women, are little girls of color. And our aim is to create more, give more opportunities for mentors of women of color to be those mentors, and support more diversity inclusion, especially at the Big Sister staff, and creating more programs like this. And also, I want to give a shout out to Trish Fontanilla. She was originally supposed to be tonight's moderator, but unfortunately, because of COVID, she had to back out. But she is also a shero in her own right. She is trying to create more. She is the founder of Boss Filipinos, which is creating more awareness about Filipino culture and food. And also want to especially thank Jinhee tonight, because it's actually her daughter's 8th birthday, and we promised that we would finish early enough so that she can celebrate her daughter's 8th birthday. Is your daughter here so we can wish her happy birthday?
She is here. Hold on. Come on, June. Say hi to everyone.
Oh my gosh, she's beautiful. Hi, June.
Hi.
Hello.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Oh, you look so pretty for your birthday. Happy birthday. Happy
She's
8th birthday.
beautiful. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
What
Thanks
do
for
you do
sharing
for
your
birthday?
mom.
Yeah, definitely. She's amazing, Shiro.
Yes,
She's
thank
definitely
you.
someone you want to follow.
I bet that cake's gonna be good.
She's been very patiently waiting because she's got a table full of presents waiting for her. But she understands how important this event was, and for me to be a part of it. So thank you all very much. It was really a wonderful opportunity to connect with all of you.
Yeah.
Yay. Eileen, so next year bring moms and daughters on.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, we'll definitely bring your daughter on, Cindy.
Oh God. All right, sure.
Yeah. So again, if you would like to be be more part of Big Sister of Greater Boston, feel free. We are always accepting new members to join our diversity board, or if you want to volunteer as a Big Sister, feel free to go to Big Sister of Greater Boston website to see how you can get more involved. Again, I want to thank all of you for being sheroes and inspirations to all of us and into your local communities. And after seeing this this panel, I know that the future, especially for AAPI women, is bright. And so with that, thank you everyone for joining, and hope you all have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Mwah.
Good night. Thank you.